The Stages of Ascent to Become a Prime Minister, and His Achievements Presented to Armenia by Nikol Pashinyan. Part 1. Nikol Pashinyan is an Armenian politician serving as the Prime Minister of Armenia since the 8th of May 28. A journalist by profession, Pashinyan founded his own newspaper in 1998, which was shut down a year later for libel. He was sentenced for 1 year for defamation against then Minister of National Security Serge Sargsyan. He edited the newspaper Hakek and Jamanak from 1999 to 2012. A supporter of Armenia's first president Levon Ter-Petres, he was highly critical of second President Robert Kocharyan, Defense Minister Serge Sargsyan, and their allies, frequently referring to them as the Karabakh clan. Pashinyan was also critical of Armenia's close relations with Russia and promoted establishing closer relations with Turkey instead. He led a minor opposition party in the 2007 parliamentary election, garnering 1.3% of the vote. Pashinyan was a dedicated supporter of Ter-Petrosyan, who made a political comeback prior to the 2008 presidential election, before losing to Serge Sargsyan. Despite Ter-Petrosyan being a very unpopular figure, and several international observers deeming the election to be fair, Pashinyan claimed voter fraud and incited protesters to attack police in the post-election protests on the 1st of March 2008, resulting in the deaths of 10 people. Convicted of organizing mass disorders, he went into hiding until mid-2009. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison for his role in the protests. He was released in May 2011 as part of a general amnesty. He was elected to parliament from Ter-Petrosyan's broad opposition coalition, the Armenian National Congress, in 2012. Pashinyan later distanced himself from Ter-Petrosyan on political grounds, establishing the party's civil contract. Along with 2 other opposition parties, Pashinyan formed the Way Out Alliance, which garnered almost 8% of the vote in the 2017 parliamentary election. He was the leader of the 2018 Armenian Revolution, which forced Prime Minister Serge Sargsyan and his government to resign. He was elected acting Prime Minister by Parliament on the 8th of May 2018 and won snap parliamentary elections in December 2018. Pashinyan's victory had originally been heralded by some observers an improvement in democracy, while others have criticized Pashinyan for just being a populist. Pashinyan's new government included multiple liberal Western and Go activists being appointed to senior positions, as well as supporters from the Velvet Revolution who had no previous political experience. Pashinyan led Armenia through the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh War, the most recent and significant outbreak of violence due to the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between Armenia with the self-proclaimed Republic of Artsakh and its neighbor Azerbaijan. The war, which was ended after 44 days of fighting by a trilateral ceasefire agreement signed by Pashinyan on the 9th of November 2020, resulted in significant human, material, and territorial losses for the Armenian side. Pashinyan's government was criticized for making minimal contributions to the war effort and for incompetent leadership. Following the war, Pashinyan was accused of being a traitor and faced protests and calls for his resignation for signing the Russian-brokered truce with Azerbaijan. Despite the protests and a declaration by 40 high-ranking military officers calling for his resignation, Pashinyan resisted calls to hand over political power. On the 25th of April 2021, Pashinyan announced his formal resignation to allow snap elections to be held in June, although he remained as acting prime minister in the lead-up to the elections. His party won the 2021 election, receiving more than half of all votes. Pashinyan took the leadership of the Collective Security Treaty Organization on rotational basis for the 16th of September 2022. Nikol Pashinyan was born on the 1st of June 1975 in Ij, in the northeastern province of Tavash. At least one of his grandparents was from the village of Yenikap, around 10 kilometers from Ij. He was named after his paternal grandfather who died in World War II. He served in the 554th Rifle Regiment of the 138th Rifle Division and died in 1943. His father, Vova Pashinyan, worked as a football and volleyball coach and as a physical education teacher. His mother Svetlana died when he was 12, and he was mostly raised by his stepmother, Yergenik, who was Vova's second wife. He graduated from the Ijben Secondary School N1 in 1991. In 2018, Pashinyan claimed to have organized student strikes, marches, and demonstrations during the Karabakh movement of 1988. He did not serve in the Armenian army because his 2 elder brothers served before him and he was not obliged to serve by law. Pashinyan studied journalism at Yerevan State University from 1991 to 1995. He was expelled from the university before graduating. Pashinyan claimed to have been expelled for his political activity, although Yerevan State University released a statement that Pashinyan had been expelled due to absences. In a 2015 interview, Pashinyan stated that he considers himself more of a journalist because journalism brought him into politics. Pashinyan became engaged in journalism in 1992 as a journalism student at YSU. He worked at the newspapers Deprutian, Hayastan, El Ragir, and Malarak. In 1998, he founded the Daily Oragir. It was affiliated with the Nor Ughai opposition party led by former Minister of Education Ashat Blaine. During the 1999 parliamentary election, Oragir was highly critical of country of legality, the party of Serge Sargsyan, then Minister of the Interior and National Security, and the Right and Accord bloc led by Ardash's Jeghamian, and supported by Samvel Babayan, the powerful defense minister of Nagorno-Karabakh. During the election, Oragir published 281 articles on political parties participating in the election, of which 11 were positive. All positive coverage was given to ex-President Levon Ter-Petrosyan's pan-Armenian national movement, which the newspaper sympathized with. In August 1999, Pashinyan was sentenced to 1 year in prison after refusing to pay a libel fine of around $25,000. He was also ordered to retract his accusations against Serge Sargsyan and Mika Armenia, a large trading company which the court had ruled constituted defamation. The properties of Oragir were confiscated and its bank accounts frozen. According to Simon Payaslian, the case made Pashinyan the first journalist prosecuted for libel in post-Soviet Armenia. His conviction was criticized by Armenian and foreign human rights activists. Human rights defender Avatik Ashkanian noted that in 1999 almost as many cases were brought against Oragir as against all newspapers of Armenia from 1994 till 1998. This is evidence of political persecution. Under apparent local and international pressure, the Court of Appeals reduced his punishment to a 1-year suspended sentence because the original sentence was too harsh. Following the demise of Oragir, Pashinyan became the editor of Hakek and Jamanak, affiliated with the minor opposition Democratic Homeland Party, led by former MP Petros Makian, which had split off from the Ter-Petrosyan-led HHSH. Pashinyan remained editor of the newspaper until 2012, when he was elected to parliament. The U.S. State Department characterized both Oragir and Hakek and Jamanak as sensationalist political tabloids. The U.S. government-funded Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, described the newspaper as sympathetic to Armenia's former leadership. Is known for its hard-hitting coverage of President Robert Kacharian and his government. On the 23rd of December 1999, Pashinyan was beaten by a gang of dozen men who were reportedly led by a local businessman who was angered by an article in Hakek and Jamanak that accused him of corruption. In March 2002, Pashinyan was charged with slandering Hovhannes Yeretsian, head of the Civil Aviation Agency of Armenia, for allegedly insulting the latter in the 6th of November 2001 issue of the newspaper, which featured a photo of Yeretsian with the caption, "Degenerate officials recruited for the civil service." The charges were condemned by the 3 largest parliamentary groups, including pro-government ones. The case was eventually dropped in April by prosecutors by citing lack of evidence. On the 22nd of November 2004, a Lada Niva car belonging to Pashinyan, parked outside the office of Hakek and Jamanak, exploded. The fire caused by the explosion was put out by firefighters. Pashinyan claimed it was an attack perpetrated by Gajik Sarik, an oligarch and MP close to President Robert Kacharian, who was deputy chairman of the Armenian Olympic Committee. He suggested it may have been a retaliation for a derogatory cartoon deploring the poor performance of Armenian athletes at the Athens Olympics. The newspaper staff believed it was hit by a Molotov cocktail or an improvised explosive device. A police inquiry immediately pointed to an apparent breakdown of the car battery's wires. Sorokin denied any involvement. Instead, he stated, in order to boost their standing, people may say different unnecessary things. During the 1998 Armenian presidential election, Pashinyan was a member of the election office of presidential candidate Ashat Blaine, former Minister of Education and Science under President Levon Ter-Petrosyan. Blaine was the leader of the Nor Ughai party, which had split from the ruling party of Ter-Petrosyan. Pashinyan entered the political scene prior to the 2007 parliamentary election. He led the Impeachment Union, an electoral bloc consisting of his political organization named Alternative, and the Democratic Fatherland and Conservative parties, led by former HHSH MP Petros Makian and Mikhail Harapetian, respectively. The primary policy goal of the bloc was impeaching President Robert Kacharian, but also ousting Prime Minister Serge Sargsyan and oligarch Gajik Sarakian from power. On the 20th of February 2007, their first rally at Yerevan's Freedom Square drew around 1,000 people, which prompted RL to note that Ter-Petrosyan's allies have a persisting lack of public support. The bloc offered a liberal alternative to the policies of Kacharian. Pashinyan stated at the rally, "We have come to this square to say that we are the masters of our country, the masters of its misery and splendor, its heroism and recklessness, its victories and defeats. What we want is a homeland with citizens, a homeland which is able to protect its citizens." On the 9th of May 2007, 3 days before the election, the Impeachment Union, along with the Pashinyan Party and the New Times Party, organized a march to the National Security Service building to demand the release of ex-Foreign Minister Alexander Armenian, whom they considered a political prisoner. It led to clashes, where policemen beat members of the opposition with batons and used tear gas to disperse the crowd. Pashinyan told the crowd, "Victory is not achieved at once. Victory is achieved step by step. Today we took a very important step towards our victory. Well done." Ararat Madasian, Deputy Chief of Police, blamed Pashinyan for the violence. Several participants led by Nikol Pashinyan provoked an incident with police, dashed to the National Security Service entrance, and when police tried to stop their movement, scuffles broke out. The police's actions were condemned by other opposition parties. Members of the opposition later moved to Freedom Square where they held a demonstration. Impeachment garnered 17,475 votes and came in 13th, with 1.28% of the overall vote, far below the threshold. Following the election, Pashinyan held a 2-day sit-in at Freedom Square to denounce the election results as rigged and demand the invalidation of its results. Pashinyan left the Constitutional Court in protest on the 7th of June, claiming judicial farce and prejudgment. In July 2007, Pashinyan stated that the opposition can prevent vote rigging and defeat Serge Sargsyan, the likely 2008 presidential successor of Kacharyan, only if they unite around a single presidential candidate. Levon Ter-Petrosyan, Armenia's first president, made a comeback on the 21st of September 2007, appearing publicly for the first time since his resignation in 1998. Pashinyan and Hakek and Jamanak expressed support for Ter-Petrosyan. Pashinyan stood behind Ter-Petrosyan when the latter announced his comeback at the Marriott Hotel Yerevan. Pashinyan was considered a key ally of Ter-Petrosyan during the 2008 presidential election campaign and was a member of his election office. Pashinyan was detained with several others for less than a day after an altercation with police officers on the 16th of October 2007 when a group of Ter-Petrosyan supporters were announcing an upcoming rally over a loudspeaker. Pashinyan was again detained on the 23rd of October along with other activists. They were taken into custody after a brawl with policemen led by Alexander Ɔfã, deputy chief of the Yerevan police, during a march through the center of Yerevan to inform passers-by about Ter-Petrosyan's upcoming rally. Police accused opposition activists of disrupting public order, while Pashinyan stated that Ɔfã behaved like a street criminal. Pashinyan, along with other activists, were released the next day when Ter-Petrosyan himself negotiated with Ɔfã. On the 30th of October, Pashinyan was charged with participation in mass riots and violence against a representative of the authorities. Pashinyan did not show up to the police station. His house was searched by police officers who did not find him there. Pashinyan claimed the increasing attacks on opposition activists was due to the growing number of Ter-Petrosyan supporters. He said, "The authorities realize that events are taking a dangerous turn for them. That is why they are taking jittery steps which will not yield any results." However, RFE/RL reported that Ter-Petrosyan remained an unpopular figure. On election day, the 19th of February 2008, the Ter-Petrosyan camp claimed numerous violations and cases of violence, while Pashinyan put responsibility for any possible violence on the ruling regime. He called the election an attempt at a criminal coup d'état and claimed that Ter-Petrosyan had won in the first round. Pashinyan was one of the most prominent orators during the post-election protests in late February. On the 21st of February, when Ter-Petrosyan's supporters set up tents at Freedom Square, Pashinyan declared the square to be the central headquarters of Ter-Petrosyan. He declared, "We expect our legitimate demands to be met. Our actions will be peaceful as long as we have not exhausted all legal methods of struggle. We are prepared for any scenario." He urged demonstrators to be restrained and patient. Pashinyan also stated in a speech that they demanded invalidation of the vote and new presidential elections. Although Ter-Petrosyan's camp disputed the election results, international observers deemed the election to be largely fair and democratic. A vote monitoring mission by the OSCE, the Council of Europe, and the European Parliament stating, "The February 19th presidential election in the Republic of Armenia was administered mostly in line with OSCE and Council of Europe commitments and standards. The high state authorities made genuine efforts to address shortcomings noted in previous elections, including the legal framework, and repeatedly stated their intention to conduct democratic elections." Ter-Petrosyan's supporters gathered at Myasnikian Square, near the French embassy, and Yerevan City Hall, where Pashinyan became the main orator. Petrosyan was put under house arrest. In late afternoon, Pashinyan called on the crowd to reinforce the barricades around the square and boost their self-defense in case of a police attack. Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty reported that many protesters were already armed with metal and wooden sticks and sounded bullish about taking on security forces. Some held truncheons and shields seized from riot police. Pashinyan called on the crowd to stay calm and not to communicate with the police. RL also noted that there are no demonstrators carrying weapons. Later in the evening, after around 20,000 people had gathered at Myasnikian Square, government forces began an assault against the protesters by firing rounds into the air to disperse them. Pashinyan urged people to stay. He also blamed the government for destabilizing the situation. Pashinyan denied provoking violence. Pashinyan was heard telling protesters to take the government by attack and that we must liberate our city from the Karabakhtsi scum, referring to Kacharyan and Sargsyan. In March 2018, Pashinyan asked the Prosecutor General of Armenia to subpoena Kacharyan for questioning for the events of the 1st of March 2008, and the latter's order to use force. Kacharyan's spokesman Viktor Saghamanyan responded, calling Pashinyan the main provocateur and organizer of the 1st of March 2008 disturbances. In his 2018 memoir, Kacharyan heavily criticized Pashinyan, characterizing Pashinyan as a main actor behind the riots in front of the city hall that resulted in casualties, and accused him of purposeful manipulation of the masses. Pashinyan went into hiding on the 2nd of March as the violent post-election demonstrations were dispersed by government forces, resulting in the deaths of 10 people. In March 2018, he publicly announced the details of his escape from the scene of demonstrations in the night of the 2nd of March 2008. He spent time at different locations in Yerevan and never left the city. In hiding, Pashinyan continued regularly writing commentaries in Hakek and Jamanak. In his writings, Pashinyan claimed to be traveling around the world with a fake Serbian passport. In 2009, he stated at a court that his accounts about supposed adventures were a piece of literary fiction. In October 2008, he wrote that the authorities have proved that only through a revolution can rule of law, civil rights, and free economic competition be established in Armenia. He stated that he believes in a bloodless and peaceful revolution and stressed that it depends on the authority. He blamed the deaths of 10 people on the 1st of March on Robert Kacharyan and Serge Sargsyan, whom he claimed ordered and organized the slaughter. In late June 2009, Pashinyan declared that he had decided to come out of hiding after a general amnesty was declared by the government. He stated, "I conclude with pride that it is now my turn to become a political prisoner. My decision to move from underground to prison is also driven by a concern about effective political struggle. The struggle needs fresh impetus. Some of my political prisoner comrades will give that impetus after regaining their freedom, while I hope to do that after finding myself in prison." Pashinyan arrived at the General Prosecutor's office on the 1st of July 2009 and surrendered himself. Entering the building, Pashinyan told surprised officers, "Hello, I am Nikol Pashinyan, and I came to be arrested." It followed an amnesty declared by the National Assembly which would allow him to be released if his sentence was less than 5 years. He declared that he will continue his struggle in prison. A court authorized a 2-month period of custody for Pashinyan, which was extended for the same period in August. Heritage, the major parliamentary opposition, declared that they consider Pashinyan a political prisoner whose detention is part of the political vendetta by the country's ruling group. An open letter signed by 60 intellectuals and public figures in August 2009 called for his release. A number of independent and pro-opposition newspapers and other media also called for his release from pre-trial detention. Pashinyan's trial began on the 20th of October 2009. In his first speech, Pashinyan called his trial a continuation of political repressions. The verdict was delivered on the 19th of January 2010 by the Court of the General Jurisdiction of the Communities of Kentron and Nork Marash in Yerevan. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison for organizing mass disorders on the 2nd of March 2008. He was given a stricter punishment than the prosecutor demanded. He was acquitted of charges of using violence against a policeman during the election campaign in October 2007. The Court of Appeals of Armenia upheld the ruling on the 9th of March 2010, also ruling that Pashinyan will serve half of his sentence in accordance with the general amnesty. The Court of Cassation upheld the decision on the 6th of May 2010. On the 18th of January 2022, the European Court of Human Rights issued a verdict in the case of Pashinyan v. Armenia submitted in 2010 concerning the 2008 presidential elections, recognizing the violation of Pashinyan's rights to freedom of assembly and expression, personal integrity, liberty, and security during the events of 2008, when he was still an oppositionist and got arrested on charges of organizing mass riots. and sentenced to 7 years. Pashinyan did not file claims for material compensation with the European Court. Pashinyan was widely recognized as a political prisoner, including by international organizations and Armenian media. David Shanazarian, ex-minister of national security, stated that it is a lynch trial against a representative of the opposition. Thomas Hammarberg, Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights, noted that the Prosecutor General's office used a detailed expert analysis of the linguistic and psychological aspects of Mr. Pashinyan's speech had been performed, and that this was instrumental in proving his role in organizing the mass disorders. Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe co-rapporteurs for Armenia, John Prescott and Axel Fischer, stated in their 2011 report Pashinyan's continued detention is also highly problematic. They stated both the grounds for Mr. Pashinyan's conviction, as well as the manner in which his sentence was handed out, raise very serious questions. In December 2010, dozens of members of the Armenian National Academy of Science, a generally pro-government establishment organization, signed a letter calling for Pashinyan's release. On the 11th of November 2010, Pashinyan claimed to have been attacked inside his prison cell at Kosh prison by 2 masked men and requested to be moved to a more secure cell by himself. Armenian Justice Ministry and the prison officials disputed Pashinyan's claims, stating no injuries were detected as a result of the examination, while prisoners testified that there was no violence. After Pashinyan requested to be moved into solitary confinement for security reasons, the prison officials agreed to his request a week later. He requested to be moved to a more secure Arctic prison on the 30th of November, and his request was granted. The Ministry of Justice stated Pashinyan's solitary confinement was due to his own request and the violations of prison regulations, including several attempts to incite other prisoners, and asked that journalists not make a political issue out of standard discipline for breaking prison rules. They stated that he was allowed to use the phone and to contact his advocates outside the prison, which he had done on several occasions. In late October 2009, Pashinyan declared his intention to run for a seat in the parliament in the 10th constituency, a single-member district that covered the center of Yerevan. The seat was vacated by Kochater Sukiasi, a businessman and an ally of Ter Petrosyan. He became the first jailed candidate in independent Armenia's history to run for parliament. He initially could not to registered as a candidate because the passport and visa department of the police refused to confirm that Pashinyan had resided in Armenia for the past 5 years. A court ruled that there was no proof Pashinyan had left Armenia during his time in hiding. He was registered as a candidate on the 5th of December. The Armenian National Congress and Ter Petrosyan campaigned extensively for Pashinyan. Youth activists of the ANC were beaten up while campaigning. The election, held on the 10th of January 2010, returned a low turnout of just 24%. Pashinyan garnered 39% of the votes, while the pro-government candidate R.S. Simonyan won some 59%. Pashinyan ally and former MP Petros Makin and 2 others were beaten and hospitalized during the election. The ANC condemned the election results by citing numerous irregularities. A similar opinion was stated by the U.S. Embassy. Pashinyan was released from Arctic prison on the 27th of May 2011 in accordance with the general amnesty declared by the government. Greeting a crowd of supporters gathered outside the gates, he declared, "Our fights is unpreventable, our victory inevitable." He was released along with Sasan Mikhaeli, a Karabakh War veteran and an ally of Ter Petrosyan. They were the 2 last major opposition politicians jailed for the 1st of March events. Pashinyan affirmed that he and the ANC are committed to the idea of democratic revolution in Armenia. On the 31st of May 2011, the ANC held a rally at Freedom Square for the first time since the 1st of March events. Ter Petrosyan called for talks with the government. Pashinyan, speaking at a rally for the first time since the 1st of March 2008 events, declared, "From today on we start a political process in favor of early presidential and parliamentary elections, because only they may return people's faith in its future." Ter Petrosyan considered Pashinyan's release an unprecedented victory. Pashinyan, in an interview, said that either snap election will take place as a result of the dialogue between the ANC and the government, or they will take place under popular pressure. He called for an early presidential election, which would be an opportunity for a smooth resignation of power. After failed talks with the government, Pashinyan called for a revolution. He declared, "Robert Kacharian, Serge Sargsyan and their oligarchs shall return all the loot to the last penny to the people. They will face trial and made responsible for the murders of the 1st of March 2008 and for oppressing their people." During the 2012 parliamentary election, Pashinyan was a candidate both in the party list of the Armenian National Congress and as a single constituency candidate in the 7th electoral district, which covered Yerevan's Malaysia Sebastia district. During the election, Pashinyan notably called on voters to wage a revolution of 30 seconds. He explained that voters are alone inside the voting booths, and they can wage a revolution by voting for the ANC in the 30-second that they have for themselves. He stated, "We do not expect your active participation in our rally. Campaign for the ANC in your workplace and at home. You enter the polling booth, vote for the ANC, and that's it. The revolution starts. The door opens up for the future of their children, for justice." In the constituency, he came in second with around 28% of the vote after Sambul Alexanian, an oligarch affiliated with the Republican Party, who garnered 58% of the vote. During the election campaign in Malaysia, Sebastian Pashinyan was confronted by several dozen pro-Alexanian women voters. In response, Pashinyan told Alexanian not to send women and hide behind their backs. In a different incident, a group of Pashinyan supporters was attacked by young men. Pashinyan was elected member of the National Assembly from the ANC, which barely passed the 7% threshold for electoral alliances and received 7 seats. In October 2012, Pashinyan publicly denounced any potential ANC collaboration with Gajik Sark and his prosperous Armenia party. Petrosian argued that through a cooperation with Sark, the ANC would be able to depose Sir Sargsyan. Pashinyan stated he did not find a compromise with March 1st criminals possible, in a reference to ex-President Kacharyan, who was thought to be supportive of Sark. Regarding the 2013 presidential election, he believed that Petrosian would nominate his candidacy, and all those who want to defeat Sir Sargsyan can defend Levon Petrosian's candidacy. After Petrosian declined to be a presidential candidate, Pashinyan did not endorse any candidate. However, following the election, he showed outspoken support for the official runner-up, Rafi Havanesian. He stated, "The current political situation is more than clear. People trust the leader of the Heritage Party, Rafi Havanesian, who must present to the society his vision regarding the further developments. My assistance to the further programs of Rafi Havanesian will depend on their political and civil contents. Bringing the Armenian people to real victories is the goal that I have always served and will continue to serve." In the post-election protests, Pashinyan joined Havanesian at Freedom Square, where he called the latter the elected president, claiming the elections were rigged by Sargsyan's government. Pashinyan stated at the 20th of February rally that the end results of the protests depends on Havanesian's determination and ability to address the people without puzzles. "The people of Armenia cannot be led to a defeat or disappointment. Victory or nothing. Victory and nothing else." Pashinyan eventually severed ties with Petrosian's ANC over the latter's pursuit of cooperation with Sargsyan's party, although he remained nominally a member of the ANC's faction in parliament. Following his break with Petrosian and the ANC, Pashinyan founded a political group called Civil Contract on the 9th of December 2013. Pashinyan, who was one of the 7 members of its governing body, declared that they will seek to remove Sir Sargsyan from power and hold free and fair elections. Other members of the board were Sasan Mikhaelian and 5 formerly politically unaffiliated activists. Pashinyan increasingly distanced himself from Petrosian and criticized him for making false promises to his supporters about imminent snap elections after the 2008 government crackdown. In October 2014, he criticized the trio of ANC, Prosperous Armenia, and Heritage parties for their alleged power-sharing deals with Sir Sargsyan instead of forcing him to resign. Pashinyan criticized the ambiguity of their demands and accused them of monopolizing of the political field in Armenia. In November 2014, he announced his plans to start an impeachment process against Sir Sargsyan to contribute to the fulfillment of the trio's pledge to end the heated political autumn with regime change. Besides Pashinyan, 2 MPs from Heritage Party, Alexander Arzumanian and Zaruhi Postan, signed the draft law on Sargsyan's impeachment. Soon, we will publish Part 2